Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the NHL Hockey channel. And today's video we got our second to last game review video of the season. We're looking at the Dallas Stars and the New York Rangers, the two teams who were eliminated in the conference final this year. We'll see what happened, why were they eliminated. We'll look at their RFAs, UFAs, and draft capital for upcoming offseason. And we'll look at their ways that they can improve in the offseason to get better and more ready for next year. We'll look at all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to this video here at the NHL Hockey channel. Before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. Would have never been able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so I'll discuss today's video. Now, as usual, like I usually do in these game review videos, I'm going to start off by looking at the two teams. The Stars were the best team in the Western Conference, had a 2-1 lead in the conference final, wound up losing 3 straight and falling to the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games. The Rangers were the best team in the league, had a 2-1 series lead in the conference final against the Florida Panthers and lost 3 straight. So both teams were in really competitive, really hard fought, really close series, and they do wind up losing 3 straight after both had 2-1 series leads to fall to the Oilers and the Panthers in the conference finals. So for the Rangers, 3 reasons why I think they were eliminated by the Panthers. 1, they were plain and simply they were outplayed. Panthers were the better team of the two. It's just quite as simple as that. And the Panthers were the better team, had more puck possession, looked like the better team most of those games. There were a couple of them that the Rangers looked pretty good in, but for the most part, the Panthers looked like they had control of that series, and the Rangers were just completely outplayed. So I'm not overly surprised that the Rangers were a team who was knocked out, given the fact they were the team who was being outplayed. Shesterkin kept them in that series completely. Had their forwards played a little bit better, maybe they would have been able to win that series, but that was a really good series there for the Panthers, and the Rangers were just outplayed. Horrific special teams. If you look at the special teams, it was a complete and utter disaster for the New York Rangers. If you look at their power play, it was 6.7%, which was second worst in the third round, and their penalty kills at 73.7%, which was also second worst in the league in this conference final. So the Rangers did not have overly good special teams. The Panthers completely outweighed them in the special teams department, and it was another huge reason as to why this Rangers team wound up being out. I mean, 6% of the power play and 73% of the PK is not overly great. And lastly was the fact that their forwards completely disappeared. I mean, they had a couple of really good offensive games, like the Game 3 where they won 5-4 in overtime. That was probably the best performance, but even then, Lafreniere and Gaudreau scored twice, and Wember got the OT winner. So their big boys on the offensive side needed to step up, and they did not. I mean, Panarin was a no-show, Kreider was a no-show, Zibanejad was a no-show, Fox did his best as much as he was hurting, but he was not overly effective. So some really bad games there from the Rangers players, and their offense being dried up, especially against a really elite level offensive unit in Florida, was a major reason as to why this Rangers team wound up being eliminated. So those were 3 reasons, in my opinion, why this team was eliminated. They were outplayed by Florida, their special teams was way superior to Florida, and the offense dried up. All their big time players could not find the back of the net. So those were the 3 reasons, in my opinion, why the Rangers team wound up being eliminated. Going over to the pending UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital. So if you look at their UFAs, not a whole bunch here. They have in-season acquisitions, Alex Wemberg and Jack Roslovic. Wemberg, who had 10 goals, 20 assists, 30 points in 79 games with the Rangers and the Kraken. Roslovic, who had 9 goals and 31 points in 59 games with the Jackets and the Rangers. Both were decent additions. Both were decent top 9 forwards. I could see maybe 1 or 2 of them be brought back on cheaper deals, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if they hit free agency. You have Blake Wheeler, who had 9 goals and 21 points in 54 games. Didn't look overly good and then got injured, so I wouldn't be surprised if he left. You have Tyler Pitlick, who had a goal and 4 points in 34 games, and Nick Petan, who had 2 assists in 6 games. Both are decent depth additions. Wouldn't be overly surprised if the Rangers let them go, so we'll have to wait and see on that. On the defensive end, you have depth defenseman Eric Gustafsson, who had 6 goals and 31 points in 76 games, and Chad Ruhwedel, who had a goal and 4 points in 52 games with the Rangers and the Penguins. Both are really good 6/7 defensemen, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if both those guys wound up leaving. So those are the UFAs. If you look at RFAs for the Rangers, not a whole bunch. You have Matthew Robertson, who had no points and no NHL games, but looks like eventually could be a solid third pair defenseman, so I would expect him to be brought back. And then you also have Ryan Lindgren, who had 3 goals and 17 points in 76 NHL games, and Schneider, who had 5 goals and 19 points in 82 NHL games this year. Both were really good defensemen. Both eventually should be still a top 4 defenseman. Lindgren already is, so I expect both those guys to be brought back too. But those are the only 3 RFAs that they have that are really significant. I feel like the current draft capital for New York Rangers, they have 4 picks for this upcoming draft, not a whole bunch. They have their own first, 4th, 5th, and 6th. So they have all of their own picks in rounds 1, 4, 5, and 6, but they have no second pick, no 3rd round pick, and no 7th round pick. So they are missing a couple of them. Now, this team was really close to making the Cup final, so I think they're all right with only having 4 draft selections in this upcoming draft, but still, it's not overly ideal. So they still have the 1st round pick, which is really good. They'll be able to use that to get a solid player, but they do not have any 2nd or 3rd round picks. So that's an interesting note there for the Rangers. And lastly, 5 ways I can see this team improve in the offseason to get better and more ready for next year. Now, first, I thought they would have to consider moving on from Kakko and Gaudreau, but in the past couple of days, we've seen both those things wind up being negated. So this was my first offseason priority, but they've wound up negating that. Gaudreau did wind up getting moved. He was placed on waivers and taken by the San Jose Sharks, so it wasn't a trade. It wasn't a buyout, but this was a really good move for the Rangers to get out of the Barclay Gaudreau contract. Meanwhile, for Kakko, they wound up extending him on a 1-year extension, so moving him is most likely not going to happen anymore. So as much as my prediction was for them to potentially improve this offseason by moving on from Kakko and Gaudreau, it's not in the way that I thought they would. They keep Kakko and they move Gaudreau via waiver. So interesting stuff there. But that was my original top priority for that team. I also think they need to get younger for next year, so I think they need to give guys like Othman, Perreault, if he does wind up signing before next year, and Sikora a chance at the NHL level. All 3 are really good prospects. Perreault is going to be eventually a solid top 6 forward, so I expect him to eventually be a solid mainstay in the New York Rangers top 6. Sikora is a really good prospect, and I think eventually could be a solid top 9 player. And Othman is a decent player who I think as early as next season could be a solid top 9 forward. So I would not be overly surprised if we saw any of these guys at least get a stint at the NHL level next year, because I think the Rangers could use a little bit more youth in that team, and I think those 3 guys definitely provide that. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if that happens. Shesterkin extension's been talked about a little bit over the past little while, but it sounds like the Rangers really want to get a Shesterkin extension done. It sounds like he'll probably get $10+ million, maybe even $11+, and probably be the highest paid goaltender in the NHL. So that'll be a really interesting addition there for the Rangers. But Shesterkin's been fantastic. The only reason they were in that series in the conference final against Florida was due to Shesterkin and his good play, and I think that could be a really decent addition there if they were able to extend him on like a 7-8 year deal. So I would not be overly surprised if that was something that happened this offseason and Shesterkin was extended. Another thing I think they need to do is add a solid 3rd pair defenseman. They have guys, like we said, Gustafsson and Ruido about to be leaving, so that does leave a hole on the 3rd pair on the left side. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they tried to go out and get someone who could really help and be partnered with a guy like Braden Schneider or Jacob Trouba. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if that happened. So I'm not exactly sure who they would target, or if they would go via the trade market or the free agent markets, but I think there's a very likely chance we could see them get a solid 3rd pair defenseman, either in free agency or in the trade market. And lastly, I think they need to add 1 to 2 top 9 forwards. Like we said, they could lose Wenberg, they could lose Roslovic. There's a couple other decent depth guys they could be losing via free agency. They just moved on from Barclay Gaudreau, so I think they definitely need some more top 9 help, maybe even top 6 help. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went on the free agent market, maybe got a guy like Kevin LeBanc or Victor Olofsson, or on the trade market, maybe try to get a guy like Andrew Mangiapane. Not sure who they'll try and target, but I definitely could see the Rangers try and add some more offensive weapons to this team to try and make them a little bit more lethal than they were last year. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there, but that's my opinion on the Rangers. Those are the 3 reasons why I think they wound up being eliminated. Those are the UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming offseason for the team, and those are 5 ways I can see this team improve in the offseason to get better and more ready for next year. Maybe go to the Cup final next year. Next, going over to the Dallas Stars. Now, as for Dallas, who was the best team in the Western Conference, 3 reasons why I think the Stars were eliminated by the Edmonton Oilers. 1, ran out of gas. They looked absolutely gassed during the Edmonton Oilers were able to take a 2-1 series lead, but after that, Edmonton completely took over. It just looked like they ran out of gas. They played the 2 last Stanley Cup champions in the 1st and 2nd round. They beat the Golden Knights in 7 games. It was a long and grueling series. They beat the Avalanche in 6 games. It was another long and grueling series. So it looked like they just ran out of steam, and their path to the conference final was probably the hardest out of all 4 teams who went to the conference finals. So I'm not overly surprised they looked gassed, and I think there's a very likely chance that that was a major reason for the Stars as to why they were eliminated. The second reason, in my opinion, was poor special teams. I mean, that Stars team looked absolutely awful on special teams. The Oilers completely outruled them. I mean, their power play was pretty good for the Oilers, and the PK was perfect. So the Stars could not get a power play goal, and their penalty kill was not overly good, especially in that Game 6 decider. So the poor special teams was a huge reason as to why the Stars team wound up being eliminated. And lastly, Andre Rasheki. shaky. There was definitely a couple of goals I think Onger should have had. He was not consistent at all in that series, and I think was one of the reasons why the Stars wound up being eliminated in the conference finals. So that's another reason in my opinion. And if Onger's a little bit better, maybe the Stars wind up winning that series, but he was not better than Skinner in this series, and that's why the Stars wound up losing in the conference finals. So in my opinion, 3 reasons why this team wound up being eliminated. 1, ran out of gas, played 2 really good teams in the first and second round. They just could not compete with Edmonton. 2, poor special teams. I mean, the special teams was not overly good for the Stars in this series. And 3, Onger was shaky. In my opinion, were the 3 reasons why the Stars team wound up being eliminated in the conference final. Going over to some pending UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for the Stars. I feel like they're pending UFAs. Pavelski, who had 27 goals and 67 points in 82 games, is a pending UFA. It sounds like he'll probably retire, so don't expect him to be back. You have Matt Duchene, who had 25 goals and 65 points in 80 games. Stars want him back. Wouldn't be surprised if he went and tested the free agent market, so we'll have to wait and see on him. You have Craig Smith, who had 11 goals and 20 points in 75 games. That's an interesting one there for the Stars. I could see him be brought back, but maybe he winds up leaving. You have Scott Reedy, who had no points, no NHL games. Decent depth player, probably winds up leaving. You have Chris Tanev, who came in season, had 2 goals, 19 points, 35 games with the Stars and the Flames. Could see a Stars try and bring him back, but he might have priced himself out of Dallas. You have Hakanpää, who had 2 goals and 12 points in 64 games. Really good third pair defenseman. Could see him to be tried to brought back. And then you also have Babe Ruth and Pouliot, who are depth defensemen, who both didn't have any points at the NHL this year. I could see both be brought back on short-term, cheap deals, so we'll have to wait and see on them. And you also have Scott Wedgwood, who had 32 games of NHL action this year, 899 save percentage and 2.85 GAA. So wouldn't be overly surprised to see the Stars wind up move on from Wedgwood. On the RFA side, Matej Blumel, who had no points in no NHL games. Once again, decent depth guy. Could see him be brought back, could see him be let go. You have Sam Steele, who had 9 goals and 24 points in 77 games. Wouldn't be overly surprised if he wasn't qualified, but he could be brought back. Then you have Lundqvist and Harley. Lundqvist, who had 2 goals and 19 points in 59 games. Harley, who had 15 goals and 47 points in 79 games. Both really good defensemen. Wouldn't be surprised if the team tried to move on from Lundqvist. Well, I think Harley's definitely going to get an extension. And then you also have Matt Murray, who was a third stringer this year. Had 1 game of NHL action, a shutout. So he looked pretty good. I could see him be brought back as like the solid third stringer for the Stars next year. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And then the current draft capital for the Stars for this upcoming offseason, they only have 3 picks. Their 1st, their 5th, and their 7th. There's no picks in the 6th round or the 4th, 2nd, or 3rd round. So interesting stuff there. I know the Stars were very close to making it to a Cup final. So once again, I'm not overly surprised if they're happy with where they are, even though they don't have too many draft picks. But I do think there's a very likely chance that the Stars are happy with their 1st, 5th, and 7th round picks. That's interesting to note there. And lastly, going over to 5 ways they can see this team improve in the offseason to get better for next year. 1, I think they need to find a new backup for Onger, which was actually done quite well over the past couple of years, but wouldn't be surprised if they try to go in a new direction. Maybe go after a guy like Laurent Brossoit or Anthony Stolarz, or someone who's on the cheaper side of things who can definitely work in a tandem or be a backup to Onger. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if that happened. I think they need to try and keep Tanev or add another defenseman. They definitely have a little bit of a hole in their top 4 if Tanev does leave, or if they potentially buy out Ryan Suter, which we talked about recently. So if those 2 things happen, they need some more top 4 help. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they were in the market for top 4 defensemen. Try to go after a guy like Nikita Zadorov or Brett Pesce if they don't wind up keeping Tanev. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I definitely think adding some more defensive help to this team could definitely be something that they could try and do this offseason. I think they need to consider extensions for both Wyatt Johnston and Jamie Benn. Both those guys are going to be entering the final year of their deals. Johnston's an RFA, Benn's a UFA. I wouldn't be overly surprised if Ben got an extension at somewhere around $4 or $5 million. Johnston, I wouldn't be overly surprised if he got a bridge deal at somewhere around $3, $4, or $5 million, or if he got a long-term deal with AV of like $8, maybe even $9 million. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I think extensions for both Benn and Johnston are something that's going to be in the room mill for this offseason for the Stars and one of their priorities. Next, they need to add some depth on their blue line. We just talked about how they could be losing Jani Hakanpää, and there's a couple of other guys who they could wind up be losing, potentially Lundqvist on the blue line. So I could see him trying to add 1 to 2 third pair defensemen who could really help round out that blue line. Once again, not sure who they'll try and target, but I think they could definitely try and add some more depth to that blue line. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they went in that direction. And lastly, I think they need to add another top 6 forward, especially if Matt Duchene leaves. That leaves a little bit of a hole in their top 6. I know they have guys like Stankoven and Bork and then line up in the not too distant future, but I think they could stand to maybe add one more solid top 6 scorer. Not sure if they go for free agent market, try and get a guy like Mangiapane or Natchez, or they go to trade market, try and add a guy like Jake Gensel or Marchessault, or try and keep Duchene. Not exactly sure, but I think there's a very likely chance that this team will try and add some more help on the blue line to try and improve this team longer term. So interesting stuff there. But that's my opinion on the Stars. Those are the 3 reasons why I think they wound up being eliminated. Those are UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for Stars for this upcoming offseason. And those are the 5 ways I think they can improve in the offseason to get better better and more ready for next year. So that's my opinion on the Stars and the Rangers. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. Do you agree with me as to why those were the reasons that those two teams wound up being eliminated from the conference final? What do you think about the UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming offseason? And do you agree with my ways of they improving in the offseason to get better for next year? Or do you think there's other ways they can improve? Definitely have to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you like it, subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're never able to without you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so I can all discuss today's video. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.